I was doing some research this week, the last couple of weeks, on validity and reliability, and I thought this would be an interesting topic to talk about because I think it's important with what's going on in the broader context of science right now. Some of you might have heard of the replication crisis, where there are some studies that have been showing, particularly coming out of University of Virginia, I believe, with Brian Nozick, that have been showing that it's really difficult to replicate some scientific studies, particularly within the social sciences, and it's moving beyond that because actually we thought, or the scientific method, some of you might know the scientific method, where you actually develop a hypothesis, right? And when you develop this hypothesis, you test it, and it should be set such that you can falsify this hypothesis when you develop this particular that you hypothesize based on theory, and it should be falsifiable. And on top of that, this particular inference that you get, or the result that you get, should be you should be able to replicate it anytime, anywhere. Anybody should be able to replicate that, and that's sort of the proper scientific method. But what was turning out is that we often don't replicate things within science, and the reason why is that we are really focused on novelty. That's a really strong component within the scientific community. We're always looking for novel insights. Well, what this does is it drives you to find things that are kind of at the fringes. Whenever you have sort of fringes of reality, sometimes it's really hard to replicate those things. And there is incentives within the sort of journal structures that we have that limit the amount of that limit the desire to replicate studies. Now this has sort of changed since this came out, and people are starting to replicate science studies much more readily. But really what it comes down to is our understanding of reliability and validity of inferences and how we develop these. So the scientific method is really what we're trying to do. It sort of assumes that there is a true world out there, and we're trying to test to discover what this true world is. And as we get to this true world, the more that we get to this, to what the truth is, the more valid our particular inferences are. And that's what we're really trying to do within the scientific community, is try to discover not only sort of novel insights, but as well as discover insights that are valid, that are sort of, and what do I mean by valid? Well, it's understanding what the truth is really difficult, as some of you probably speculate. But generally, what we're trying to think about is stuff that is representative. It could be generalizable to many different contexts, as well as it is predictive. Being predictive is really, really important, in the sense that you can actually predict something in the future based on this knowledge that you developed, or this inference that you developed. So we also have this other concept that's just as important, and it's called reliability. So what is reliability? Well, whenever we make inferences on the world is unique. Every particular time you do something, you have a unique experience, and this is across any particular dimension you're looking at, whether you're looking from sort of a physics perspective and you're looking at molecules, for example. There's always a unique situation going on. If you're doing a laboratory experiment in a chemistry lab, I myself am a chemical engineer as training. You always have sort of weird circumstances that happen. So if you think of your lab, for example, there might be a little bit of extra dirt on your bench that you have. You might have different sort of atmospheric conditions in a given day. There might be any particular amount of uniqueness around a particular situation. And what we're trying to do whenever we do making scientific inferences is that we're trying to create a sort of reliable inferences about something, some particular construct. Whether the construct is an idea, for example, or there's actually a definition of a construct, but I'm not going to get into that. But really, what we're trying to look at is something that we're trying to tap into. And what we want to get is reliable inferences. The way that we can get reliable inferences is we just gather data across many different situations, and we aggregate that. Now, some of you might know if you've taken Introduction to Statistics methods, what we're trying to do is get the average, right? So the more that you accumulate across many different situations, you're going to get what is called central tendencies on a particular inference. And the central tendency, this internal, which is sometimes called this internal consistency of a particular construct, well, that is what we understand as reliability. That the construct is somewhat more reliable than others. And when you say that when a construct or an idea is more reliable than others, well, that means that there's the inferences that you've gathered across these many different situations always come upon one particular idea repeatedly, one particular inference repeatedly. There isn't a lot of variability. That's a key construct. A lot of variability in the different sort of inferences that you've gathered and pulled together. So this is an important construct, or an important idea, that we have reliability whenever we're doing scientific studies, and that's really what we're trying to do when we're replicating. That's the idea that when you replicate, you're going to get across many different methods, across different researchers, for example, different scenarios. Maybe there's somebody in Italy, maybe there's somebody in the United States. They're all working on the same scientific thing. And what you want to do is replicate that, and that is getting reliability of this particular construct or particular idea, this inference that you have. So when you have reliability, what this means is that everybody is sort of agreeing upon a particular inference. And when you have this agreement, then you want to see whether it's valid. And there's two ways to sort of think of this inference is valid. The first one is thinking about, and there's actually many dimensions, but the two really important ones that I'm going to talk about today is whether it's internally valid. So whether this particular, this construct that you have, this reliable construct that you have, can actually stand against, if you test it in sort of an experimental way, whether somebody can, whether there are no possible ways to refute the particular finding that you have. That's really what internal consistency is what you look for is threats to, what you look at, I apologize, that's really what internal reliability, or internal validity is, I apologize, is what you're looking for is that you can present this result and somebody could beat it up, and that's what we do in science, is we try to beat up on other people's ideas, see if we can deconstruct it, and whether we can actually come up with different flaws within the study. And if we can't come up with different flaws within a study, or the construct that you have, the reliable construct that you have, then we can say that it's internally consistent, or it's internally valid, that the scientific study that you have, the inference that you have, is internally valid. It's relatively, it's representative of something, and we can't sort of pick it apart. And there's not a lot of limitations to the particular study that we have. The other dimension of validity is external validity. And this is how generalizable that we can use this result to different domains. And this is kind of thinking about sort of predictive validity is really important here, where you're just moving to different domains, whether this insight that you have is actually predictive of reality around you. And so what this replication crisis that we have is really boiling down to situations where we have not a lot of reliability of the particular inference that we have, because it's not being replicated by many different people. And as a consequence, when we actually go in and sort of see if this is a valid result, we actually don't often find that as a valid result. The sort of necessary condition of validity is that you have a reliable inference, right? So you have to have it pretty much consistently over time, a sort of tried and true inference that you have, and then you try to apply it, and that is where you develop, where you understand where something is valid or not, that particular inference is valid or not. that's a really important concern because that's what we do as scientists and as social scientists. We're trying to come up with not only novel insights, but these insights that are valid, right? That are representative of reality. And we can sort of change, we can explore different scenarios with these insights this knowledge that we've developed. And that's really what the heart of what the replication crisis is that because we weren't doing a lot of we weren't testing the reliability of particular ideas that we've been developing, and it's sort of attacking the validity of the insights that we have. Now, there's many different reasons why we why you might not be as worried as you should be in terms of developing scientific inferences or the studies that we have. There's lots that there's many situations that are particularly unique, and I think that's what we're trying to look at now is how unique these particular insights are, and given sort of different conditions with sort of human nature is that as time is progressing, we're accumulating knowledge, and we're sort of changing as we're accumulating knowledge as human beings. That these results that we found years ago might not apply to sort of conditions of today. That's actually called threats due to history or maturation. For those of you who know a little bit of the scientific or understanding of experimental design. So with that, one of the really cool things that I think is going on in how we can navigate this particular problem is through field experiments. And it's not field experiments in sort of a grand sense. There's a lot of field experiments out there, particularly in developmental economics, for example, or development or in education that are doing some really cool, fantastic stuff. But those are really, really expensive. They tend to be they tend to be costly, not only in terms of money, but in terms of time and resources and stuff. But stuff that's going on within the software community, A/B testing, for example. I'm a really big fan. This is one of my main motives for actually creating reciprocity. Is that I apologize. That's my doggy. The reason why I'm creating reciprocity is so we can actually get at sort of more of these valid and reliable inferences using A/B testing, for example. And the other particular component that I think is really cool in terms of methodologies that are, I should say what field experiments are. So field experiments are the application of sort of laboratory-style experiments to the real world situations, right? And then the other thing that's really important to realize with sort of the scientific insights that we're gathering is not only are the results important, right? But there's also sort of a logic that we develop within scientific papers that is perhaps just as much important, and that's called the theory, and that theory builds on other stuff, right? So we have to be very, not necessarily dismissive of results that can't replicate, because there is a lot of stuff, there's a lot of theory that's involved that provides some really interesting insights. Now, we probably have to investigate that a little bit more to understand why the theory is not holding up, but just because something doesn't replicate, or the theory doesn't replicate in a particular empirical situation, doesn't necessarily mean that theory is incorrect. And I think that's important to realize. So this is the two remedies that I think are that might actually provide a lot of improvements to what we already have in terms of the replication crisis that we have. The first one is these new methodologies that are coming out, particularly field experiments, is a very small field experiment. And the other one is thinking about the sort of theoretical implications